Hey guys! Did you know that a lot of you who watch my videos aren't subscribed yet? I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to like the video and leave a comment below. Your interaction really helps the channel grow and allows more people to see my content. Thanks so much for your support. I used to be a fire lookout in the Smoky Mountains. Let's just say it came with a very strange set of rules. When I first got the job, I was over the moon. I'm a loner. Love to read, love my own company. So when I saw that ad for a fire lookout, I practically jumped out of my skin. Working the night shift at Walmart wasn't exactly a dream come true. Don't even get me started on the stories I could tell about that place. They put me through a week of training before my first shift. Mostly boring stuff, reading manuals, getting CPR certified. Then they showed me the ropes and drove me out to the tower. In the middle of the day, that fire tower was impressive. Looming high above the trees, supported by those massive metal legs. But once I started climbing the narrow metal stairs, the rust flaking off at the edges, let's just say my excitement faded. Fast. I don't like heights. It's not like I get vertigo or anything, but I prefer to have my feet on solid ground. By the time we reached the top and pushed open the trapdoor to the cabin, I was sweating bullets. The inside of the cabin, though, made me forget all about the climb. It was like a tiny apartment. Small fridge, sink, counter, cupboards, a little table. In the center of the room was another table with a map attached to it. And, of course, windows everywhere. A 360-degree view of the national park. The view was incredible. Mountains and valleys stretching for miles in every direction. A photographer's dream. The other lookout, a grizzled old guy named Frank, explained the job. 24-hour shifts. I could sleep, but I had to set an alarm and scan for fires every hour during the night, every half hour during the day. There was a radio to report any problems and a phone to call the fire department if things got really bad. I was already picturing myself getting paid to take amazing pictures and read. This was going to be the easiest job ever. Frank told me to read the rule book first thing. He asked if I had any questions. I said no. He stressed that I couldn't leave the tower, no matter what, until someone came to relieve me. Then he headed down the stairs, and I followed to get my stuff from my car. He got in his truck and hesitated for a moment, like he wanted to say something else. But then he just shook his head, wished me luck, and drove off. It took 3 trips to get all my stuff up to the top. At home, carrying groceries up to my apartment is no big deal. Here, it was a matter of life and death. I was almost at the top with a box of food when I stumbled on one of the narrow steps and nearly went over the side. I had to stop for a minute to catch my breath before I could keep going. Maybe this job wasn't going to be such a cakewalk after all. I pushed the thought aside and went back down for the rest of my stuff. Supplies, books, chargers, camera, 2 more trips, and I was finally done. I collapsed into the chair, ready for a nap. That's when I heard static on the radio. I jumped up and grabbed it. "Hello?" I said. No answer. I figured Frank was just reminding me to do a fire check. But hauling all that stuff up the stairs had put me behind schedule. It had already been almost an hour since he left. I did a slow scan of the forest, checking for smoke. Nothing. First check done. I celebrated with a bottle of water and started putting away the groceries. The cupboards weren't empty, but they weren't exactly stocked with gourmet food either. A whole shelf of canned peaches? Not exactly thrilling. But I had enough to get by for a few shifts. I put the bread on the counter and the cold cuts in the fridge. I'd have to get some better food next time I went shopping. Time for another check. The sun was starting to set, so I grabbed my camera and took some pictures. They were amazing. I couldn't wait to upload them when I got home. I glanced around the cabin and noticed the manual. I hadn't read it yet. I sighed and picked it up, figuring it would put me to sleep in no time. As I opened it, a piece of paper fell out. I picked it up and read. The real rules. 1. Never, under any circumstances, leave the fire tower until you are relieved. 2. Turn off all lights between the hours of 2 and 3 a.m. 3. If you receive a radio transmission or phone call between those hours, do not answer. 4. If anyone knocks on the trapdoor during those hours, tell them they'll have to wait until morning. Do not open the door. 5. If you see a glowing object floating toward the tower, don't look at it. Cover your eyes and count to 50. When you open your eyes, it should be gone. If not, cover and count to 50 again. 6. If animals surround the tower, don't go down to look. Fire your flare gun into the air twice, 1 minute apart, then lock yourself in the bathroom and hope for the best. I stared at the note. Was this a joke? Some kind of hazing ritual for the new guy? I wasn't looking forward to getting pranked at 2 in the morning. I put the note back in the manual and skimmed through it. The official rules were all standard stuff, boring as hell. For my next check, I used the binoculars. I spotted a bear and 3 deer. I took some pictures, but the zoom on my camera wasn't good enough. You could tell it was a bear, but the pictures were blurry. I decided to buy a new camera with my first paycheck. What was the point of having this amazing view if I couldn't take good pictures of it? Twilight came, and the sky lit up in brilliant shades of orange. I took more pictures and did my scan. I was about to go back inside when I noticed a thin wisp of smoke in the distance. I grabbed the binoculars, but I couldn't get a clear view because of the trees. I used my compass to get a general direction, then grabbed the radio and called the ranger on duty. I think I've got a fire, I told him, giving him the direction and approximate distance. Roger that, he said. I'll check it out. I stayed glued to the binoculars, waiting for the smoke to die down. Minutes felt like hours. The smoke just kept rising. Almost half an hour later, the radio crackled to life. "Hey, rookie," the ranger said. "Did you find it? Did you put it out? I still see smoke. Did I give you the wrong location?" I blurted out. "Whoa, slow down," he said. Everything's fine. It was just a campfire. Oh, what? A campfire, he repeated. Nothing to worry about. A campfire, I said, feeling my face burn with embarrassment. Yeah, you'll want to see a lot more smoke, thicker and darker, before you call it in. I stood there in silence, mortified. Cheer up, the ranger said. At least you didn't call the fire department. I glanced at the phone, knowing I was about to do just that. Yeah, thanks, I mumbled. Sorry about that. Don't worry about it, kid. Better safe than sorry. I put my face in my hands. So much for making a good first impression. Twilight faded, and the last traces of light disappeared as the clouds turned black. The darkness was total. Doing my checks from inside was impossible. With the lights on, all I could see in the windows were reflections of myself. Alone in a wooden box 100 feet in the air, it was more than a little creepy. I stepped out onto the deck. The darkness was oppressive. I couldn't see a thing. How was I supposed to spot a fire? I slowly walked around the deck, my eyes adjusting. Gradually, I could make out the shapes of the mountains and the faint glow of the nearest town in the distance. It was a small comfort, knowing the world was still out there. I finished my check and went back inside. After being out in the darkness, the lights in the cabin seemed way too bright. I turned off the overhead light and the one. I used to be a park ranger in the Rocky Mountains. Now, I think we're all in trouble. It was almost 3 in the afternoon when the knock came. I was surprised, to say the least. It was early January, the wind was howling, and the temperature was a frigid 12 degrees. The wind chill? Forget about it. Way below zero. I'd been glued to the weather radar all day, expecting a blizzard to hit by nightfall. It had been snowing lightly, but nothing major, yet. Usually, I kept the ranger station door unlocked. Hikers and campers often stopped by for a hot coffee or to register their campsite. But the latch had been acting up, and the door kept blowing open. So, I'd been keeping it locked until I could fix it. This knock was different. Light, hesitant, almost polite. I almost missed it over the wind and the creaking of the old station. I was in the middle of emailing about a new generator. The old one was on its last legs when I heard it. I had to stop typing and really listen. It came again, a little louder this time. I pushed back from my desk, took a sip of coffee, and went to open the door. 5 people stood outside, bundled up in brand new, expensive-looking winter gear. 3 guys, 2 girls. All their coats and snow pants were the same, except for the colors, and they all had that North Face logo. Their faces were practically swallowed by their hoods. I had to hide a grin. They looked ready to climb Mount Everest, not hike in the Rockies. Tourists. Probably from Europe, I figured. Probably never seen this kind of weather before. It happened all the time. People came from all over to see the mountains, and sometimes the winter weather caught them off guard. "Hey there," I said, stepping back. Come on in and warm up by the fire." The guy who'd been knocking said something to his friends in Spanish, then turned back to me with a grin and stepped inside. The others followed close behind, eager to escape the cold. I closed the door and locked it. "Thanks, sir." "I'm Miguel," the guy said, pulling back his hood and unzipping his coat. "This is Luis, Diego, Sofia, and Elena." I nodded to each of them. "It's very cold," Miguel continued. "We came to visit from Spain, to see your beautiful mountains." His accent was thick, but his English was better than my Spanish. "But it seems a storm is coming, and we are not prepared." "You got that right," I said, patting him on the shoulder. I opened the door to the bunk room and flipped on the lights. "Looks like we're in for a blizzard. Bad time for a hike." I smiled. "Luckily, we've got plenty of space for you folks to wait out the storm." "I'm Jake Turner, park ranger. Coffee's over there, and there are bunks and a sitting area in here." They just stared at me blankly. I guess I'd lost them somewhere along the way. I just smiled again and gestured to the room. They all grinned and nodded, shuffling past me and dropping their packs on the bunks. I made sure they all had hot drinks, then went back to my desk. They seemed like nice folks, grateful for the help. An hour later, another knock came. This one was slow, uneven, almost like a staccato beat. I sighed and headed back to the door. No visitors for a week, and now they were showing up like it was a hotel. I unlocked the door and put on my customer service smile. Standing there, covered in snow, was a guy about my height, 6 feet or so. Unlike the others, he wasn't wearing fancy winter gear. His clothes were mismatched, like he'd raided a thrift store. He had expensive-looking blue quilted nylon pants that didn't quite fit, a fur-lined coat that looked like it was made of wool, and an old fleece jacket underneath. His boots were new but looked more like summer hiking boots. "Hey there," I said, waving him in. "Coming out of the snow." He didn't say anything, just gave a slight nod and walked past. A strong, musky smell followed him. I wondered if he was one of those hermits you hear about, living out in the woods in some makeshift cabin. He went straight to the bunk room and sat on a bunk in the corner. He didn't take off his coat or say anything to the others. I noticed he didn't have a pack with him, which made me think he lived close by. The others tried to be friendly, but he just sat there, watching them with this weird little smile. They gave up after a while and went back to talking quietly among themselves in Spanish. I wondered if he was in shock. It was getting colder outside, and he wasn't dressed for it. I thought about checking him for frostbite or hypothermia, but something told me he wouldn't appreciate it. I stood there for a minute, watching. Something about the guy seemed off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the way he moved, the silence, the way he just sat there, it was strange. There was something else, too. Something I couldn't quite grasp. A feeling of unease, like a warning bell going off in my head. I found myself hoping he'd warm up and leave. The others must have felt it too. They'd all moved to the far end of the table, talking in hushed voices. They kept glancing at him, but only for a second, like they were making sure he hadn't moved. and none of them sat with their backs to him. I was about to go talk to him, to shake off the weird feeling, when Miguel appeared in front of me, frowning. "Sir, my friends and I are worried about the other campers," he said. That got my attention. There weren't any campers registered to be out here. Was this new guy one of them? Maybe they were in trouble. What campers? I asked. He pointed vaguely north. We passed their campsite on our way to the lookout point before the weather turned bad. Maybe half a kilometer up the trail, by a small stream. He glanced back at the stranger. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman. They had winter tents and seemed well prepared for the storm. We stopped and warmed ourselves by their fire. They seemed experienced, but I'm no expert. "Well, it sounds like they should be okay," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "They should have checked in with me, but if they're prepared, I'm sure they'll be fine. I'll check on them when the storm passes." He looked at the stranger again, then back at me, his eyes intense, like he was trying to tell me something. He lowered his voice. "The campers, they were all wearing very good clothing. Sophia's brother is a climber, and she recognized their gear." "Even better news, then," I started, but Miguel cut me off. "Exactly like the pants that man is wearing now," he said quietly. I looked at the stranger, at his mismatched clothes. His gloves were thin, totally unsuitable for this weather. But they looked well made, like something you'd wear for a fall hike. He still hadn't moved or said a word. His eyes drifted over the Spaniards with what I could only describe as a hungry look. Like he was sizing them up. That prickling feeling in my brain came back, stronger this time. Something wasn't right. "Are you sure?" I asked Miguel. He shrugged. "As sure as we can be. Sophia is certain." "Was this man with them?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Miguel shook his head. "No. I've never seen him before." He leaned closer. "This man, there is something." He trailed off. I nodded. "I know. I feel it too." I went to my desk and pulled out my handgun, attaching it to my belt. I put a spare magazine in my pocket, grabbed my heavy jacket, and pulled on my hat. Miguel followed me, watching. I looked over my shoulder, making sure we were out of sight of the bunk room. "I'm going to check on the camp. Have you ever handled a shotgun?" I asked. He nodded. "I hunt with my cousins. I'm a good shot." "Good," I said. "That door over there is my room. Inside, you'll find a 12-gauge pump, loaded. If you need it." He nodded silently. "I should be back within the hour. Keep him here until I return, but don't do anything unless you have to. Be careful, Jake." I feel a darkness in the air. I gave him a tight nod and stepped out into the wind. The cold hit me like a punch. The wind howled in my ears, and the snow, already halfway up my shins, made it tough to move. The campsite Miguel had described was one of the few marked sites along this trail. We encouraged campers to check in, but not everyone did. Sometimes it was the newbies who didn't know any better. Sometimes it was the experienced folks who thought they didn't need to. As I followed the trail, a growing sense of dread filled me. I didn't know what I was going to find. If I was lucky, I'd find 3 tents with their occupants safe and sound inside. If not, well, I'd deal with that when I got there. Half an hour later, I reached the campsite. Or what was left of it. The remains of 3 high-quality winter tents were clustered around a fire pit, the bright red material shredded and flapping in the wind like flags in a hurricane. I pulled my hat down tighter. "Hello?" I shouted over the wind. My voice sounded weak and pathetic. "Is anyone here?" Nothing. Just the wind and the snapping of the nylon fabric. It looked like a bear attack, but I hadn't seen a bear in months. We didn't have brown bears here, just black bears. They could be dangerous, but they didn't hunt humans. I moved closer, gun drawn, and checked the tents. Nothing. No bodies, no blood, no sign of a struggle. Just destroyed tents. And then I saw it. A flash of dark gray, half hidden in the snow. I went over and kicked at it, then picked it up. It was a pair of thick winter pants, old and torn, covered in dark red-brown stains. They were fur-lined and looked like wool. As soon as I lifted them, that musky smell hit me, and I dropped them in disgust. A hint of blue in the snow caught my eye. I cautiously approached. It was a puffy winter jacket. I reached out to uncover it and stumbled back in shock. It was an arm, still wrapped in the sleeve, crudely severed at the shoulder. I cursed and fell back, landing hard on my ass. I sat there, gasping for air, the cold seeping into my bones. I was gripping my gun, aiming it at the pants on the ground like they were going to jump at me. Shit. I finally managed to say as reality crashed back in. I scrambled to my feet and started running back to the station, to Miguel, Luis, Diego, Sofia, Elena, and him. What was he? Some kind of psycho serial killer? It didn't make sense. I'd been here for 3 years and never heard of anything like this. As I ran, I thought about those gray pants. They hadn't just been torn, they'd been shredded. And the blood. Had he replaced his damaged pants with those of his victim? And then I thought about how none of his clothes matched, how his boots and gloves weren't right for the weather. How long had this been going on? 20 minutes later, I saw the lights of the ranger station. The temperature had plummeted, and I was amazed I'd made it back. Adrenaline and fear, I guess. I stopped in front of the station. The door was hanging open a few inches. My mind screamed at me to go in, but I had to catch my breath. Why was the door only open a crack? If it wasn't locked, the wind would have blown it wide open. But the open door meant one thing: something was very wrong. I crept to the door, gun drawn. I pushed gently at first, then harder. Something was blocking it. I squeezed through the gap, the wind and the creaking of the station covering the sound of my entrance. A body lay behind the door. One of the women, I could tell by the shape. Her head and upper body were mutilated, the skin and scalp torn away. Blood was everywhere, the smell of copper thick in the air. I heard a wet, tearing sound coming from the bunk room. The lights in there were flickering wildly, the bulb swinging back and forth. I ducked into the room, my blood running cold. Bodies, or pieces of bodies, were scattered everywhere. I could feel the heat in the room, the heat of violence. Empty shotgun shells lay on the floor, next to the remains of Miguel. He was covered in terrible wounds, his limbs barely attached to his body. The tearing sound was coming from the corner. The stranger was crouched over one of the bodies, Luis, I thought, by the yellow jacket. He was tearing at the flesh with his mouth. His hands were different. Elongated, with jagged, chitinous claws. I raised my gun and fired. The stranger's head snapped back, and he let out a horrifying shriek. I fired again. And again. He exploded upwards, landing on the wall, his claws digging into the wood. He turned his head to face me. His eyes were completely black, huge, and his jaw seemed dislocated, his mouth stretched in a grotesque grin, revealing rows of sharp teeth. He leapt to the next wall, then the next, like some monstrous insect. I fired again and again, the empty casings clinking on the floor. For a moment, he just hung there, his black eyes fixed on me. I waited for him to attack, but he was hurt. Black goo dripped from the bullet wounds. With a final shriek, he leapt through the window, shattering the glass. And then he was gone. I stood there alone, surrounded by the remains of the tourists. My gun was empty. That was almost a year ago. I transferred to a desk job in the city, as far away from the wilderness as I could get. After the investigation, they tore down the old ranger station and built a new one. I tried to go back, but I couldn't. I kept seeing that creature, hearing it shriek in my nightmares. Sometimes, I think I hear more than one. I slept with my handgun and a shotgun, the doors locked tight. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there. Maybe searching for me. I've spent the last year searching for answers, reading about cryptids and paranormal stuff. But nothing made sense. Then I found an article about the uncanny valley. It's this idea that the more human-like robots and CGI characters become, the creepier they seem. The theory is that it's an evolutionary thing. Maybe, way back when, there were predators that looked almost human, and our ancestors developed an instinct to be wary of them. I wonder if these things have always been with us, hiding in plain sight. Yesterday, on the subway, I saw a young woman sitting alone. People seemed to be avoiding her. There was nothing obviously wrong with her, but something felt off. I think we're all in trouble. Consider this a warning. There are things in this world you don't want to know about. Things that lurk in the shadows, in the spaces between the known and the unknown. Stay away from them. Don't go looking for them. Don't tempt fate. I'm telling you my story in the hope that it will be enough to quell your curiosity, to dissuade you from venturing into the darkness. Because once you've seen what I've seen, there's no going back. It all started on a night like any other. At least, it seemed that way at the time. I'd barely arrived at the ranger station when the calls started pouring in. Vacation homes being broken into, ransacked. It was becoming a regular occurrence. You see, out here in the Appalachian Mountains of western Maryland, people tend to forget that they're encroaching on wild territory. They build their fancy vacation homes, expecting nature to respect their boundaries. But the animals, they don't care about property lines. They've never been hunted, never threatened, and they see these houses as nothing more than, well, interesting new features in their landscape. So, I hopped into my truck and headed out to my first call of the night. An elderly couple, terrified by a deer that had crashed through their sliding glass door. They'd managed to trap it in a spare room and needed me to relocate it. When I arrived, the couple was in shock. Eyes wide, faces pale. I could practically see the adrenaline coursing through their veins. I ushered them into another room and closed the door, giving them some space to calm down. I found the nearest exterior door and opened it, creating an escape route. Then, I cautiously approached the room where the deer was trapped. Taking a deep breath, I slowly opened the door. The sight that greeted me was horrifying. Blood. Everywhere. The walls, the floor, the furniture, all splattered with crimson. The deer lay in the center of the room, panting heavily. I approached slowly, keeping the door open, hoping it would bolt. But the closer I got, the more I realized this deer wasn't going anywhere. Its side was covered in deep gashes, the marks too far apart to be from a coyote, too organized for a bear. It looked like something out of a horror movie, like Freddy Krueger had gotten his claws on it. The deer's eyes widened as I approached, but it didn't move. A bad sign. Its breath came in ragged gasps. I knelt beside it, my stomach churning, and gently rolled it over. That's when I saw the full extent of the damage. Its entire flank was torn to shreds, chunks of flesh missing. Huge bite marks punctuated the wounds. Bites that looked impossibly large. If I didn't know any better, I would have said it was bitten by a shark. Blood oozed from the wounds, and the deer struggled to breathe. I knew there was nothing I could do. I stood and left the room, closing the door behind me, allowing the poor creature to die in peace. When I returned, it was gone. Vanished. I took pictures of the bloodbath with my phone, a chilling record of the carnage. Then, I went to update the couple. When I opened the door to the room where they were waiting, the woman screamed. The man's eyes bulged. They scrambled away from me, climbing onto the furniture, their fear palpable. "What's wrong?" I asked, confused. You're covered in blood," the man stammered, pointing a trembling finger at me. "The deer got you," the woman shrieked. "You've got rabies." "Or worse," the man added, his voice barely a whisper. I quickly explained that it was the deer's blood, that I hadn't been attacked. They calmed down slightly, but their eyes were still filled with terror. "So, what killed the deer?" the man finally asked, his voice trembling. I hesitated. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to send them spiraling back into panic. "Probably a coyote," I said, knowing it was a weak explanation. "A coyote," the man repeated, his voice rising in alarm. "Or a bear," I added, trying to sound reassuring. It didn't work. They were terrified. They decided to leave, fleeing the house as if the devil himself was on their heels. I watched them go, then returned to the room where the deer had been. I needed answers. I followed the trail of blood out the shattered glass door and into the woods. With my flashlight illuminating the path, I tracked the deer's bloody trail towards a pond behind the house. There were signs of a struggle, a chaotic mess of tracks and blood. But the other tracks, they didn't make any sense. They were huge, shaped like duck prints, but massive, like a giant duck had been stomping around the pond. A giant duck with sharp teeth. I shook my head, trying to make sense of the impossible. Then it hit me. They weren't duck prints. They were the footprints of a man, wearing swim fins. But why? Why go to all that trouble to poach a deer when you could just use a tranquilizer gun? A disturbing thought crept into my mind. What if this wasn't about poaching? What if this was about something far more sinister? I thought about the mental institution in the next county. Had someone escaped? Was this some deranged individual getting their kicks from torturing animals? The thought sent a chill down my spine. What if this person decided to escalate? To go after something bigger? Like the vacationers in the nearby houses? I glanced back at the house, wondering how many people were inside, how many were armed. I felt a surge of protectiveness for these unsuspecting vacationers, these people who had come to the mountains seeking peace and tranquility, unaware of the darkness lurking in the shadows. As I pondered the situation, a sound from behind me startled me. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the darkness, but saw nothing. Then, I noticed a ripple in the center of the pond. Probably just a fish, I told myself, but a sense of unease lingered. I took more pictures of the scene, documenting the strange tracks and the blood stains. Then, I headed back to my truck. I had more calls to respond to, and this mystery would have to wait. My next stop was another vacation home, about 3 miles away. A woman in her 30s answered the door, her eyes widening at the sight of the dried blood on my uniform. "Oh my," she said, stepping back. "Good evening, ma'am," I said, apologizing for my appearance. "Did you report a break-in?" "Yes, we did," she said, her voice friendly but cautious. She led me upstairs to the kitchen. I was expecting another bloodbath, but this was different. The door had been forced open, but not shattered. The intruder had simply unlocked it and slid it open. And there they were again, those giant duck prints. My blood ran cold. This house was miles away from the last one. How many other houses had this person hit? How many other people were in danger? The woman showed me the ransacked kitchen. Cans of sardines and tuna, torn open with something sharp, not a can opener. Claws, I realized with a shudder. It would take an incredible amount of strength to tear through metal like that. Then, I saw it. A small pool of blood next to one of the tuna cans. "Ma'am," "Could I trouble you for a sandwich bag?" I asked. She handed me one, and I carefully collected the blood sample, sealing it in the bag and tucking it into my pocket. Then, I followed the trail of footprints out the back door. Behind the house, just like the last one, was a pond. The tracks led straight to the water's edge and disappeared. I shone my flashlight across the surface, but saw nothing. "What should we do?" the woman asked, her voice startling me. I hadn't realized she'd followed me outside. I advised her to lock her doors and try to get some sleep, assuring her that the intruder wouldn't return. But my words lacked conviction. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. The next 2 calls were thankfully routine, teenagers stealing beer. No blood, no strange tracks, just kids being kids. I returned to the station, changed out of my blood-stained uniform, and spent the rest of the night writing reports, trying to make sense of the events that had transpired. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Giant duck prints, shark-like bites, a deer that had seemingly been partially devoured. It was all too bizarre. I decided to pay a visit to the mental institution, just to rule out the possibility of an escapee. But the nurse I spoke to scoffed at the idea. "We don't have escapes," she said, her tone laced with a hint of arrogance. I left feeling uneasy. If it wasn't an escaped mental patient, then what was it? My next stop was the local police department. I handed the blood sample to a friend on the force, asking him to analyze it. "Maybe it'll help us track down this thing," I said, unable to find a better word to describe the creature I suspected was responsible for the attacks. I went home, exhausted and troubled. The mystery weighed heavily on my mind, and sleep was a long time coming. The next day, the situation escalated. More break-ins, more panic. The owner of the resort was frantic. People were canceling their reservations, demanding refunds. When I arrived at the station, he cornered me, his face red with fury. "You told people to leave," he accused. I merely suggested. I began, but he cut me off. "Do you want to pay for their rentals out of your own pocket?" he snarled. "I work for the state, not you," I retorted. He turned an even deeper shade of red. "Would you rather see people in body bags instead of animals?" I asked, my voice rising. "That wouldn't be good for business, would it?" He sputtered, then stormed out, muttering threats under his breath. I spent the night investigating 5 more break-ins. Only 2 were genuine, the rest were clearly staged, desperate attempts by vacationers to get out of paying their bills. The 2 real break-ins followed the same pattern as before. A partially broken window, just enough to reach in and unlock the door. Cans of seafood, torn open with those impossibly strong claws. This time, they'd even gotten into the freezer, devouring a bag of frozen shrimp. Once again, I followed the tracks to the pond. I stood at the water's edge, staring at the placid surface. I knew these ponds were designed to be shallow, no more than 5 feet deep in the center. If the creature was using them to escape, it would have to be able to hold its breath for an inhuman amount of time. I watched the pond for 20 minutes. Nothing. No ripples, No bubbles, no sign of life. It was as if the creature had vanished into thin air. After finishing my reports, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I drove home, grabbed my snorkeling gear, and returned to the scene of the latest break-in. Wading into the pond, I pulled on my mask and snorkel and dipped below the surface. The water was murky, but I could see the bottom clearly. Fish darted amongst the weeds, and a lone turtle paddled lazily by. Nothing unusual. I swam towards the center of the pond, the water growing deeper. Soon, I could no longer touch the bottom. I floated on the surface, scanning the depths. Then, I saw it. A dark shape on the pond floor. At first, I thought it was a rock, but something about it seemed off. I took a deep breath and dove down. The closer I got, the larger the shape became. It wasn't a rock. It was an opening. A tunnel leading down into the darkness. I hesitated, a shiver of apprehension running down my spine. But curiosity overcame my fear, and I swam towards the opening. The tunnel descended sharply, the walls closing in around me. I'd never been claustrophobic before, but the tight confines and the encroaching darkness were starting to make me feel uneasy. I thought about turning back, but there was no room to maneuver. I had to keep going. I swam deeper, the light from above fading rapidly. My lungs began to burn, but I forced myself to remain calm. I checked my watch. 15 minutes had passed since I'd submerged. Suddenly, the tunnel opened up, the walls receding into the distance. A faint light flickered ahead. I swam towards it, desperate for air. I broke the surface, gasping for breath. I was in another pond. Somehow, I'd swum through an underwater tunnel, connecting two seemingly separate bodies of water. That's how he was doing it, I realized. He was using the tunnels to travel undetected between the ponds, emerging to raid the houses before disappearing back into the depths. I swam to the edge of the pond and emerged, my heart pounding. I'd found the answer to the mystery, but it had raised even more questions. Who was this creature? Where did it come from? And what was it doing here? I returned to the dive shop, hoping to learn more about the mysterious diver. But the owner couldn't offer any helpful information. We have a few regulars, he said, but no one new, and no one who needs their tanks refilled more than once a week. I went home, frustrated and exhausted. The mystery continued to haunt me. How was this creature surviving underwater for so long? Where was it getting its air supply? I decided to try a different approach. I borrowed a couple of trail cameras and set them up at each pond, hoping to capture the creature on film. I also wanted to get a good look at its face, to see if I could identify it. That night, I stayed away from the ponds, giving the creature free rein. In the morning, I collected the cameras and eagerly downloaded the footage. Just as the second video finished downloading, my phone rang. Hello? I answered. Hey, John, it's Steve. I got the results from the blood sample you gave me. Great, I said, hitting the play button on the first video. Were you able to match it to any hospital records? Not exactly, Steve replied. Why not? I asked, my eyes glued to the screen as a ghostly green figure emerged from the darkness. The image was blurry, but it was definitely a humanoid shape, walking upright towards the camera. Well, the thing is, Steve said, his voice hesitant, the blood came back as reptilian DNA. I froze. Reptilian DNA? What did that even mean? Are you there? Steve asked. Yes, I'm sorry, I stammered, my mind reeling. Could you send a copy of your findings to my office? Sure, no problem, Steve said. Thanks, I mumbled, hanging up the phone. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. The creature in the video was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It was tall and slender, with long, clawed limbs and a wide, toothy mouth. Its skin was a mottled green, and its eyes glowed with an eerie luminescence. I clicked on the second video. This one was even clearer. I could see the creature's webbed feet, the sharp claws on its hands, the rows of razor-sharp teeth. It was a nightmare come to life. I printed the images and rushed to the station, eager to share my findings with the other rangers. But their reactions ranged from skepticism to outright mockery. You're seeing things, John, one of them said, shaking his head. Just then, the resort owner walked in. What's all the commotion? He asked, his eyes narrowed. It seems John has solved the case of the break-ins, one of the rangers said, handing him the lab report and the pictures. The owner studied the evidence, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to excitement. Do you know what this is? He asked, holding up the picture of the creature. I'm not sure, I admitted. I've never seen anything like it. He grinned. This is money, he declared. What do you mean? I asked, confused. Those idiots who chase cryptids, he explained, they'll pay a fortune for a chance to see this thing. And then there's the TV shows, the merchandise. He trailed off, his eyes gleaming with dollar signs. You may have just saved my business. I stared at him in disbelief. You don't understand, I said. This is a dangerous creature. If you'd seen what it did to that deer. So what do you want to do? He interrupted. Hunt it down and kill it? Maybe not kill it, I said, but we need to capture it. Relocate it to a safe environment where it can't hurt anyone. You idiot, he shouted. This is a gold mine. I could make a fortune. People would flock here just to catch a glimpse of this thing. I wouldn't even have to fix those broken windows. He was practically salivating at the thought of the money he could make. But what about the people? I pleaded. What if it attacks someone? He waved a dismissive hand. Who cares about the people? I've got a chance to make a killing, and you want to throw it all away because you're worried about someone breaking a nail? He turned to the lead ranger, Charles. Isn't this a wildlife preserve? He asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Yes, it is, Charles said cautiously. And aren't the animals protected by law? Well, I suppose so, Charles admitted. What if those animals pose a threat? I interjected. The owner ignored me. "How many deer were killed by coyotes last year?" he asked Charles. "Dozens," Charles replied. "And were the coyotes removed from the preserve?" "No," Charles said. The owner turned to me, a triumphant smirk on his face. "See," he said, "it's all part of the natural order. Survival of the fittest." Charles sighed. "John," he said, "I know you have everyone's best interests at heart, but you're going to have to let this go." I glared at him. "And what happens when this thing decides it likes the taste of human flesh?" I asked, my voice rising in anger. The room fell silent. Everyone avoided my gaze, except for the owner, who was practically beaming. He was already envisioning the headlines, the crowds, the money rolling in. I looked around the room, searching for an ally, but found none. Disgusted and disillusioned, I removed my badge and placed it on the desk. "I quit," I said, my voice flat. If that had been the end of the story, I would have considered myself a failure. But I wasn't ready to give up. I knew this creature was dangerous, and I couldn't just stand by and let it hurt anyone. I took my pension and rented one of the vacation homes on the preserve. The owner, true to his word, had leaked the news of the cryptid sighting, and the place was swarming with hunters and TV crews, all eager for a glimpse of the mysterious creature. My goal was different. I already knew the creature existed. I knew how it was moving undetected. Now, I needed to find a way to stop it. I settled into the house and formulated a plan. Each night, I would place a large tuna fish beside the pond, hoping to lure the creature out. Then, I would observe it, study its behavior, learn its weaknesses. The first night, the creature approached the fish cautiously, sniffing it for a long time before finally snatching it and disappearing into the pond. Each night after that, it became bolder, less hesitant. It was clearly enjoying the free meals, and the lack of media attention was keeping it complacent. As the days passed with no further sightings, the cryptid hunters grew restless. They began to suspect that the owner had fabricated the whole thing, and his reputation plummeted. In desperation, he hired an actor to dress up in a creature suit and roam the woods, hoping to revive interest. But the ruse was quickly exposed, and the owner's credibility was shattered. Meanwhile, I continued to feed the creature, keeping it away from the vacation homes and the unsuspecting tourists. But my money was running out. I had rented the house for 2 weeks, and between the rent and the cost of the tuna, my funds were dwindling rapidly. I had 3 nights left. The preserve was practically deserted. I was the only one left. It was time to make a decision. I stared at the large tuna on the table, a bottle of bleach beside it. Should I let the creature live and see what happened? Or should I end its reign of terror before it could claim another victim? I thought long and hard, weighing the potential consequences of each option. Then, I made my choice. A dangerous choice. I took the fish outside and placed it beside the pond, then stepped back and waited. An hour passed. Then, the water rippled, and the creature emerged. It saw me and hesitated, its eyes glowing in the darkness. I stood perfectly still, my arms at my sides, showing it that I meant no harm. It approached slowly, sniffing the air, its gaze fixed on me. Then, it snatched the fish and, in a breathtaking display of agility, leaped 20 feet into the air before diving into the pond with barely a splash. I collapsed onto the ground, my heart pounding. I'd taken a huge risk, but it had paid off. The creature had shown restraint. Now, it was my turn. The next night, I repeated the ritual, but this time, I didn't bring any fish. The creature emerged, its eyes searching for the expected meal. I showed it my empty hands, and it growled, sniffing the air for the scent of tuna. It hissed at me, flexing its claws, its eyes filled with a predatory hunger. I stared back, my heart hammering in my chest. It opened its jaws, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth, its breath a foul stench that made my stomach churn. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. But the attack never came. After what felt like an eternity, I opened my eyes. The creature was gone, vanished without a trace. I returned to the house, packed my belongings, and left the preserve, leaving the creature to its own devices. I could only hope and pray that it would remain content with its fishy diet and leave the remaining residents, including my former colleagues, in peace. I went home and tried to sleep, but the events of the past 2 weeks haunted my dreams. I had faced a creature of nightmares and lived to tell the tale. But the experience had changed me, leaving me with a profound sense of unease, a lingering fear of the darkness and the things that lurked within it. The next morning, I read the newspaper with a sense of dread. There, on the front page, was a story about a break-in at the wildlife preserve. The only thing taken? Cans of tuna fish. I sighed. The creature was still out there, but for now, it seemed content with its nocturnal raids on the pantry. I could only hope it would stay that way. So, I repeat my warning, don't go looking for this creature. If you see it, don't tell anyone. Just leave it alone and hope for the best. Because some things are better left undisturbed, some secrets better left buried in the shadows. My brother, Michael, killed our mother. He did it in the shadow of the old lighthouse, the one that stood like a crooked tooth on the cliff overlooking the Atlantic. It was the kind of night where the darkness was so thick, it felt like you could reach out and touch it. He ripped her open, right there on the rocks. I saw him shove her lungs into his mouth, then her heart, like he was starving and she was his feast. I know this because I was there. I watched it all. Michael grinned at me, his face lit up by the lighthouse beam that swept across the cliffs. "This is for you, little brother," he said, his voice raspy. "This is for all of us. You'll get it someday." That was a lifetime ago. 30 years, maybe more. And I still don't get it. I don't think I ever will. I was only 3. Why I was there with Michael, how I even got to that cursed lighthouse, it's all blur. Those memories are locked away in a part of my mind I don't ever want to visit. All I remember for sure is Sarah, our sister, finding us. She came down from the house, calling our names, a lantern swinging in her hand. I can still see the light spilling over us, the way her face twisted when she saw Michael's bloody grin and Mom's, well, I can't even describe it. Her scream echoed across the water, sharp enough to wake the dead. Dad came running with his shotgun. He would have blown Michael's head off, but the bastard ran. Straight into the whisper wood, the dense, tangled forest we were always told to stay away from. That was the last time any of us saw him. He's gone, Dad told us, his voice hollow. The woods swallowed him whole, just like he swallowed her. If you ask Sarah, she'll say it wasn't my fault. That there was nothing a 3-year-old could have done against a 17-year-old like Michael. That he would have killed me too. But Dad always saw it differently. Or at least, he used to. He's dead now. Sarah found him hanging from an oak tree, his body swaying in the wind like a broken toy. 2 branches were jammed into his eyes, and strange symbols were carved into his face. His insides were spilled out onto the ground, his intestines trailing towards the whisper wood like a macabre invitation. I won't follow them, Sarah wrote in her letter. The intestines, I mean. I know that's what it wants, whatever killed him. I saw him talking to the old woman by the creek a few days ago. You don't think she had anything to do with it, do you? A shiver ran down my spine. The old woman. We all knew about her, a creature as old as the hills, with power that could make your blood run cold. She'd always wanted our land, the lighthouse. I couldn't imagine what she'd do if she got her hands on it. But this didn't feel like her style. The old woman didn't care for theatrics. She was all about efficiency, not drawn-out torture. This was different. Whoever killed Dad wanted to make a statement. It wasn't just murder, it was a message. But what kind of message? Sarah had her own theories. It's an omen, Jasper. I know it. You can't run from this. We're tied to this land, to this lighthouse. Her words were smudged with tears, the writing frantic. I remember Dad's last words to me. He said that leaving Shadow Point would have consequences, that the things the lighthouse kept at bay would start to leak into the world, poisoning it, haunting it, taking it over. The truth is, I'm scared, Jasper. I'm scared that whatever killed Dad is going to come back, and I don't know if I can face it alone. I need you. I've never asked you to come home, but I'm asking now. Please, just for a little while. Sarah. I read the letter over and over, tears blurring the ink. 10 years. 10 years I'd been away, building a new life, burying the nightmares, trying to outrun the guilt. And now this. Sarah was calling me back. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, pacing my apartment. My mind scrambled for an excuse, any excuse, to ignore the letter. I hated Shadow Point, the lighthouse, the woods, but deep down, I knew Sarah was right. Dad's death was an omen, and omens were my curse. I'd always seen things. As a kid, I saw our dog get hit by a car a week before it happened. I saw storms brewing before a single cloud appeared in the sky. I saw those twisted creatures in the whisper wood, tearing travelers apart, feasting on their flesh. I saw it all, just like I saw Michael kill Mom, days before it actually happened. Tragedy. That's all the omens ever showed me. Grief and pain. I thought if I left Shadow Point, I could protect my family, save them from the darkness that clung to us. I was wrong. Idiot, I said to my reflection. Wishful thinking doesn't make it go away. The lighthouse was calling me back. I could feel its pull in my mind, a siren song I couldn't ignore. I grabbed my keys and ran. I didn't let myself think. If I did, I might chicken out. I jumped in my car and hit the gas, leaving the city, my job, my life, in the dust. I drove towards the only hell I'd ever known. I drove for 1,000 miles, then 1,000 more, until the road turned to gravel, then dirt, then disappeared altogether. I stopped at the edge of the whisper wood, the trees rising like a wall of shadows in front of me. Their branches were bare, clawing at the twilight sky. I stepped out of the car, my breath catching in my throat. Even here, on the outskirts, I could feel the fear creeping in, like icy fingers tracing my spine. That was the power of the whisperwood. I pulled my jacket tighter and walked to the trunk. Inside, I had a lantern and a bag of letters. Letters filled with hopes and dreams, things I loved. Dad had taught me that to survive the whisperwood, you had to pay the price. You had to light your way with your will to live. I struck a match and set a letter on fire, the flames licking at the paper as I shoved it into the lantern. The light was weak, barely enough to see my feet, but it would have to do. I just hoped I had enough letters to last the journey. Shadow Point was miles away. If I had more time, I would have written more. But I didn't. Because the omens never stopped. The night before Sarah's letter arrived, I had a dream. I saw a figure, tall and skeletal, with eyes like burning coals. It was hunched over a body. A woman's body. Her hair was the color of Sarah's, and her eyes were the same shade of blue, but her head was 10 feet away from her body. It was Sarah's head. The woods were a suffocating blanket of darkness, the towering trees like skeletal fingers against the night sky. Moonlight struggled to pierce the dense canopy, leaving me to navigate by the flickering light of my lantern alone. Inside, letters burned, each one a tiny beacon against the encroaching shadows. I hoped I'd brought enough, but already the weight of the bag on my shoulder felt lighter than it should. Not good. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I pushed through the undergrowth. Somewhere in this maze of trees was a path, a narrow, forgotten trail that would lead me to Shadow Point, to Sarah, to the lighthouse. If only I could find it. Lost, a voice rasped, chilling me to the bone. I spun around, raising the lantern and squinting into the gloom. Who's there? A low chuckle echoed through the trees, playful yet menacing. A shape emerged from the darkness, something that walked upright but had the head of a wolf. A dogman. I stumbled back, thrusting the lantern forward as if it were a shield. This grants me safe passage, I said, my voice trembling. You can't harm me. The laughter intensified, mocking. The dogman dropped to all fours, a hulking beast the size of a bear. Its teeth gleamed in the lantern light as it stalked closer. Safe passage while it lasts, it growled. but it won't last long. It lifted a hand, disturbingly human-like, and picked at its teeth with a long, black claw. I can wait. Damn. I hadn't brought any silver. Even if I could fight this thing, I couldn't kill it. Leaving the city without preparing, without even a silver knife. Stupid. Foolish. Now I was paying the price. I clutched the bag on my shoulder, the remaining letters crinkling beneath my fingers. You're going to be waiting a while, I lied, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. The dogman didn't reply. Its padded feet followed me, silent as death, sniffing the air. Sniffing me. My skin crawled. How much farther? Too far. I still hadn't found the damn path. You're right to be afraid, the dogman whispered, its voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. Am I? I glanced over my shoulder, but the creature was just beyond the pool of lantern light, a shadow within shadows. Your old man was just the beginning, it continued. Things are changing here. The old order is crumbling. You're a nameless haunt, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. What would you know? Its jaw snapped shut with a sound like a gunshot. I flinched, nearly dropping the lantern. The laughter returned, sharp and cruel. And you're a coward, it sneered. Nameless or not, I'll have your heart in my teeth before the hour is out. Count on it. I fumbled for another letter, my fingers shaking. Probably sooner than that, I thought, panic tightening its grip. Where the hell is that path? Wait. The sound of rushing water just ahead. I stumbled forward, pushing through a tangle of branches. There it was, a narrow creek winding through the trees. The same creek I used to explore as a kid. If I followed it, it would lead me back to Shadow Point, to the lighthouse, to safety. Hope flickered in my chest. My chances of survival had just gone from 0 to slim, and I clung to that sliver of possibility. She's next, you know, the dogman said, rising onto its hind legs. It towered over me, a monstrous silhouette against the dim sky. Without your old man, the girl's as good as dead. I ignored it, gritting my teeth. It wanted to provoke me, to make me drop the lantern. You're well informed for a haunt, I said, trying to glean any information I could. Maybe you know what killed my father. The laughter returned, a chilling howl that echoed through the trees. The dogman paced alongside me, kicking up stones. I shielded the lantern. If it went out, I was dead. Something funny? I asked, my voice tight. I just forgot how long you've been gone. 8 years? 10? You never met him, did you? I frowned. Met who? The dogman stopped in front of me, its eyes burning with malice. The stick man, it whispered. He's on his way to Shadow Point. He'll be killing your sister as we speak. I searched its eyes, but there was no hint of a lie. It was telling the truth. Damn it. I sprinted. My feet pounded against the rocky path, the creek a dark ribbon beside me. How long would it take to reach Shadow Point? Too long, I thought despairingly. She's already dead. The image from my dream flashed before my eyes, the skeletal figure with burning eyes, hunched over Sarah's lifeless body. Faster. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning. The Dogman loped effortlessly beside me, its teeth snapping close to my ear. Time for another letter, don't you think? That one's almost out. What? I glanced down. The flame was still strong. The world tilted. My feet slipped on a wet stone. Stupid. I crashed to the ground, cursing my own carelessness. I blinked, disoriented. The light. Where was the light? I scrabbled for the lantern, but the darkness was absolute. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. Looking for this, the Dogman chuckled. I turned towards the sound. Please. Here you go. Something whistled through the air. I reached for it, missed, and it smashed against the rocks beside me. No! I gasped. Broken glass sliced into my fingers as I frantically searched for the lantern. "Uh-oh," the Dogman said, its voice devoid of humor now. It was close, too close. I could smell its foul breath. Looks like you've lost your safe passage. I grabbed the broken lantern, the flame still flickering weakly. I could still use it if I could shield it from the wind. I dug into my bag for another letter, but a heavy paw slammed into my chest, pinning me to the ground. I wheezed, struggling for air. Told you I'd have you between my teeth, the Dogman snarled. Its jaws snapped near my face. Question is, which end do I start with? Maybe the feet. I like to savor the screams. I thrashed, clawed at the creature, but it was too strong. Please. I choked out. Don't beg, it growled. Desperation leaves a bad taste. Suddenly, I was falling. The Dogman had dropped me. Why? A yelp pierced the darkness. My heart pounded. Letters. I needed another letter. I scrambled for my bag. Another yelp, a sound of pain. I couldn't worry about that now. I had to secure my own survival. My lighter sparked, the paper curled and caught fire. Good. I shoved the burning letter into the lantern, shielding it with a rock. That should buy me a few minutes. A new sound now, wet and sickening. Flesh tearing. A low, guttural whimper. I swallowed hard. The Dogman wasn't the most powerful creature in the Whisperwood, but it was still a formidable predator. Whatever could take it down. Hello? I called out, my voice trembling. The lantern flickered, casting a dim light on the scene in front of me. Blood. So much blood, flowing over the rocks, staining the creek. I crawled closer. The Dogman lay on its side, whimpering as something carved into its neck, back and forth, with chilling precision. You're rusty, a voice said, cold and familiar. A man's voice. He stopped carving, lifting the blade, a long, serrated knife gleaming in the moonlight onto his broad shoulder. I raised the lantern higher, my breath catching in my throat. The man was tall, impossibly tall. His dark hair fell around his shoulders, framing a face that was both familiar and terrifying. His lips curved into a chilling smile. "At long last," he said, "the prodigal son returns. And with him, the end of all things. You!" I breathed, my voice a strangled whisper. No words could express the storm of emotions that raged within me. Rage, pain, terror, and a hatred so profound it threatened to consume me. I hadn't looked into those eyes since I watched them kill our mother 30 years ago. "What's the matter, Jasper?" Michael asked, his voice a silken purr. "Don't you want to give your big brother a hug?" They call me a wilderness expert. Been exploring forests for the better part of 2 decades. I'm no fool. I plan my trips carefully. Always pack enough supplies to last a couple of weeks, just in case I get lost. Satellite phone, GPS, even a weapon as a last resort. Sometimes, getting lost is part of the thrill, you know? As long as you know what you're doing. But this is about a guy who didn't take those precautions. A guy who wandered into the unknown and paid the price. It happened on my last trip to the Pisgah National Forest, here in North Carolina. Deep in the woods, I found a journal hanging from a tree. Only a few pages left, the rest torn out. "Kindling," the writer said. The contents? Strange. Disturbing. But I'll let you be the judge. My name is Alex Walker. Student at UNC Asheville. Don't know the exact date, but I started this on August 3rd, 2023. Been about 2 weeks now, I think. If you find this, stop looking for me. Not much paper left, so I'll keep it short. About a week ago, I got a message on Instagram. Some guy said he was looking for adventurers, young and fit, to earn some cash. Offered me $1,000 to spend 48 hours in the woods, surviving on whatever I could find. Said he was making a documentary about wilderness survival. Wanted to see how people would handle it. He provided a backpack with some supplies, a GoPro to record everything. I used to be in the Scouts, so I figured, why not? 2 days in the woods is nothing. And with that kind of money, I could upgrade my gaming rig and have enough left over for pizza for the rest of the semester. We set up a meeting. He told me to just bring some sturdy clothes, he'd provide the rest. When I met him, he seemed normal enough. Rich, though. He dropped me off in the forest in his private helicopter. On the flight over, he explained that the backpack had a GPS tracker so he could find me after the 48 hours. I trusted him. He seemed to know what he was doing. He dropped me off and flew away. I checked out the backpack. A simple pocket knife, which I put in my pocket. This journal, which I also pocketed. A matchbook with 2 matches, a water bottle, one of those thermal blankets, some rope, and other basic survival stuff. Oh, and the GoPro, which I strapped to my chest. No map, No compass, no navigation tools. The idea was to be lost and survive. Spent the first day hiking, trying to get my bearings. Nothing but thick trees, the kind that make you feel like you're being watched. I wanted to find a water source, but no luck. It was getting dark, so I decided to set up camp. Gathered some branches and leaves, found a small clearing. Used a pocket knife to cut some smaller branches for firewood. Had to use some pages from this journal to get the fire going with one of my matches. So far, so good. I wrapped myself in the thermal blanket and slept next to the fire. Woke up before sunrise. The fire was dead, and I didn't want to waste my other match, so I packed up and kept moving. After a few more hours, I heard it, the sound of rushing water. A stream. My water bottle was almost empty, so I was thrilled. 2 days in the woods for $1,000. Easy money. I followed the stream, hoping to find a river or a lake. I was getting hungry. Some fish would be great. But even if I didn't find any food, I could last 2 days. It got dark again, and the stream was getting wider, but still no lake. I should have stopped to make camp while there was still light, but I was stubborn. Finally, it was too dark to see. There was a sliver of moon, but not enough light to keep going. I gathered some wood in the dark and set up camp. Used more pages from the journal to start the fire with my last match. Then I crashed, hoping to find that lake in the morning. Something woke me up in the night. A sound I couldn't place. Like something heavy dragging through the leaves. I sat up, every nerve on edge. Bears? Wild boar? Or something else? I couldn't just stay there and wait. I grabbed a burning branch from the fire and held it out, trying to see into the darkness. That's when I saw them. Eyes. Dozens of eyes, reflecting the firelight. They were all around me, watching me. I scrambled back, fear gripping me. I had to get out of there. I threw the burning branch into the woods, hoping to scare whatever was away, and ran. I didn't stop running until I couldn't hear anything but my own ragged breathing. I collapsed on the ground, exhausted and terrified. What were those things? I'd never seen anything like that before. When the first hint of dawn appeared, I got up and kept moving. I had to find my way back. But the forest looked different. Unfamiliar. Like I'd been transported to another place. I wandered for hours, the sun beating down on me. I was lost. Truly lost. And alone. By the time night fell again, I was desperate. I hadn't seen any sign of civilization, no trails, no roads, nothing. Just endless trees and the feeling of being watched. I tried to start a fire with sticks, like I'd learned in the Scouts, but my hands were shaking too much. Finally, I managed to get a spark, and with some dry leaves and a few more pages from the journal, I had a small fire going. I huddled next to the flames, fear gnawing at me. I knew I wouldn't sleep. Not with those eyes watching me from the darkness. The next day, I stumbled upon a stream. It wasn't the same one I'd followed before, but it was water. I drank deeply, feeling the cool liquid soothe my parched throat. I followed the stream, hoping it would lead me to safety. But the forest remained a maze, twisting and turning, with no end in sight. Days turned into nights. Nights turned into days. I lost track of time. I was surviving on berries and whatever small animals I could catch. But I was growing weaker. One evening, as I was making camp by the stream, I heard a noise. A low, guttural growl coming from the trees. I froze, listening. The growl came again, closer this time. I grabbed my pocket knife, my only weapon, and backed away from the stream. The growling grew louder, and then I saw it. A creature emerging from the trees. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Tall and gaunt, with long, sharp claws and glowing red eyes. I turned and ran, the creature's growls echoing behind me. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, until I collapsed on the forest floor, gasping for breath. I lay there, waiting for the creature to find me. But it didn't. Maybe it had lost my trail. Or maybe it was toying with me, letting me think I had escaped. I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to keep moving. But where could I go? The forest was a trap, and I was caught in its web. I wandered for days, my hope fading with each passing hour. I was starving, exhausted, and terrified. I knew I wouldn't survive much longer. Then, one afternoon, I saw something in the distance. A clearing. And in the middle of the clearing, a cabin. I stumbled towards the cabin, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. Was it real? Or was it just a hallucination, a cruel trick of my mind? As I got closer, I saw that the cabin was real. It was small and run down, but it was shelter. I approached cautiously, unsure of what I might find inside. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The cabin was dark and dusty, with a musty smell. There was a single room, with a fireplace, a table, and a bed. I sank onto the bed, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. The disappearance of my aunt 3 years ago was a tragedy that shook our family to its core. The recent emergence of these emails, however, has transformed the tragedy into something far more sinister. My aunt, Clara, and her daughter, Sarah, vanished from their family campsite, an abandoned mining claim known as Camp Wilson, nestled deep within the Colorado Rockies. Despite extensive search efforts, their bodies were never recovered. The only remnants of their presence were Clara's backpack and a series of unsettling tracks that defied explanation. Now, 3 years later, these emails have surfaced, seemingly transmitted from beyond the grave. My cousin, Mark, the recipient of these chilling messages, was profoundly disturbed by their content. He found them so unsettling that he forwarded them to me, confessing that they were tainting his memories of his mother, warping them into something dark and disturbing. He implored me to decipher them, to provide him with a sanitized interpretation, as if I could somehow cleanse the inherent horror embedded within their words. While I cannot offer him a sanitized version of the truth, I can present the unvarnished reality of his mother's final messages. Thursday. Mark. We arrived at Camp Wilson safely. The journey was arduous, and Sarah suffered from car sickness throughout the drive and subsequent hike. Upon reaching the cabin, she immediately sought respite. We arrived just before nightfall, and fatigue precluded any culinary endeavors beyond consuming granola bars for sustenance. I managed to ignite the wood stove, providing us with the comfort of hot tea. Rover, our canine companion, displayed signs of anxiety but settled once the cabin became comfortably warm. The hike was picturesque, with an abundance of wildflowers adorning the landscape. You and your father deserve commendation for the remarkable restoration of the cabin. The presence of a sturdy roof and a functional door is profoundly appreciated. Kindly convey my admiration to your daughters for the exquisite painted rocks they placed along the trail. They are truly remarkable. We could incorporate more such artistic creations into the garden. I have brought bamboo for the purpose of delineating the newly established garden beds. The compost should have reached maturity by now. Our intention is to dedicate the weekend to cultivating the garden, followed by a return to civilization on Tuesday morning. Sarah, armed with a map of the original mining claim, aspires to locate the entrance to the abandoned mine. I harbor doubts about her prospects of success, suspecting that any such entrance has long since collapsed. Your grandfather embarked on a similar quest years ago but met with failure. Cellular service remains unreliable, as is customary in this remote locale. However, this absence of modern connectivity contributes to the allure of this wilderness retreat. I am certain that your grandfather would have reveled in this environment. He would undoubtedly be positioned upon the rocks with his easel, capturing the splendor of the canyon on canvas, his neck inevitably succumbing to sunburn. I sense his presence here, more acutely than elsewhere. It is as if none of us truly depart this earthly realm, is it not? With love, Mom. Friday. Mark. Despite overwhelming exhaustion, I successfully excavated 2 garden beds on the southern flank of the cabin. The soil exhibits peculiar inconsistencies, ranging from impenetrable hardness to surprising malleability. My progress is frequently impeded by stones and buried timber. I have introduced zinnias and sunflowers, anticipating that they will attract avian visitors, although their long-term survival in this arid climate is questionable. Sarah resourcefully prepared a midday repast of eggs and noodles utilizing the wood stove. We partook of this culinary offering with gusto. Rover exhibited an abundance of uncharacteristic energy throughout the afternoon. Sarah endeavored to temper his exuberance with an extended hike, but upon their return, he persisted in his fervent desire for egress. Perhaps he senses the absence of your grandfather or simply yearns for the unconfined expanse of the outdoors. I, conversely, find solace within the confines of the cabin, my cot providing a welcome respite from the unyielding earth. The sole deficiency I perceive is the absence of artificial illumination. My flashlight has inexplicably vanished. We neglected to deploy the solar lanterns upon our belated arrival yesterday, and their existence has subsequently faded from our recollection. Consequently, I am relegated to my bed, composing these dispatches that remain unsent, rather than indulging in my preferred activity of scrutinizing the antique coins unearthed during my horticultural endeavors. These coins, 3 in number, bear the semblance of silver but lack the customary effigies, adorned instead with enigmatic inscriptions and alien-like motifs. My attempts to decipher the lettering proved futile. As darkness descended, I recalled the coins nestled within my pocket, eager for closer examination under proper lighting and with the aid of my spectacles, but alas, it was too late. I shall endeavor to capture their likeness photographically tomorrow. They evoke memories of the vintage silver dollars you and your grandfather once sought with such fervor. Perhaps these relics, potentially dating back to the era of the initial mining operations in the 1850s, possess monetary value. Affectionately, Mom. Mark. Midday finds me confined within the cabin, besieged by a tempest of dust. This meteorological phenomenon evokes a longing for the presence of windows, though the canvas flaps, secured with tenacious Velcro, are thus far proving adequate in repelling the intrusive particles. The wind's passage through these makeshift barriers produces an unsettling auditory phenomenon, akin to the mournful lamentations of a spectral being. Perhaps this eerie symphony accounts for Rover's heightened anxiety. My own composure is waning as well. Sarah, accompanied by Rover, has ventured forth to explore the lower reaches of the precipice in pursuit of the elusive mine entrance. Preoccupied with my gardening pursuits, I was oblivious to her departure. She remarked upon the absence of her flashlight, and I reciprocated with a similar observation. "Isn't that odd?" she quipped, but my attention was captivated by the discovery of additional peculiar coins, nestled mere inches beneath the topsoil. A substantial accumulation now resides within my possession, their weighty presence and radiant allure captivating my senses. Only after retreating indoors and depositing these newfound treasures upon the table did the singularity of her comment fully register. I glanced upwards to behold her receding figure, already a considerable distance down the trail, Rover dutifully trailing in her wake. Indeed, the peculiarity of the situation was undeniable. The vanishing flashlights are not the sole anomaly. A quantity of paracord, employed for the purpose of securing the bamboo intended for the garden, has likewise absconded from its designated location upon the rafters. Sarah inquired about the whereabouts of her beef jerky, a purportedly substantial quantity of which had been left upon the shelf adjacent to the entrance. We mutually attributed its disappearance to Rover's insatiable appetite, though the absence of any telltale remnants of packaging belied this convenient explanation. Furthermore, I suspect I may have unearthed a skeletal fragment in the vicinity of the nascent garden beds. While I entertain the possibility of its animalian origin, I am not entirely convinced. The coins, however, continue to materialize, their trajectory seemingly guiding me back towards this macabre discovery. While the implication is unsettling, I am reluctant to divulge this disquieting information to Sarah, sensing that Rover already harbors suspicions. He studiously avoids the garden and directs his vocalizations towards the wind. It is a disconcerting notion that our family has frequented this location for years, unaware of the secrets lurking beneath the surface. Sunday. Mark. While an apology for causing you undue concern would be customary, the persistent failure of my messages to traverse the digital ether renders such an act moot. I shall dispatch Sarah to the summit of the hill, armed with my tablet, in hopes of establishing contact with the outside world. Yesterday, she sought refuge within a cavernous recess, accompanied by Rover, as they awaited the abatement of the tempestuous winds. I confessed to succumbing to a degree of apprehension during her absence. She, too, admitted to experiencing similar anxieties. She recounted observing peculiar footprints etched into the dust near the canyon's base, resembling those produced by footwear of a distinctly formal nature, with an angular heel and pointed toe. Their trajectory led towards a fissure in the rock face, where Shivermutet the mine entrance lay concealed. The resurgence of the wind compelled a hasty retreat towards the trail and the shelter of the alcove. Her voice still carries the echo of curiosity, tinged with a hint of trepidation. Secluded locales such as this possess an inherent eeriness. The discovery of skeletal remains or enigmatic markings in the dust readily conjures unsettling narratives within the mind. Sarah has always possessed a resilient spirit, yet I occasionally overlook the fact that all three of you have attained adulthood. I gaze upon her and still envision the young girl with grazed knees, relentlessly pursuing her elder brothers. We dined upon tuna salad, accompanied by a modicum of wine. It is difficult to fathom that Sarah will soon reach the milestone of 30 years. The inexorable passage of time is a poignant reality. Today, Sarah has pledged her assistance with the garden, remaining in close proximity to the cabin. A mere 2 nights remain before our return to civilization. I harbor hopes of enlisting her aid in removing a formidable obstacle, ostensibly an old, desiccated root, but in actuality, I harbor suspicions of its true nature, another skeletal relic. The accumulation of evidence points towards this conclusion: the coins, the peculiar inconsistencies in the soil's composition. My garden, it seems, encroaches upon someone's final resting place. Should my suspicions prove accurate, I intend to relocate the remains to a more suitable location, marked and respectfully concealed within the sagebrush. Armed with my trowel, I commence my excavation, meticulously removing the earth encasing the root-like object. Its elongated, rigid form eventually revealed its true identity, a femur. Further excavation unveiled additional fragments, a fractured pelvis, a tarnished brass artifact, perhaps a buckle or a tool component, and a profusion of coins, surpassing the previous discoveries in both quantity and diversity. Pennies, half-dollars, and even misshapen nuggets of gold emerged from the depths. "Mom, what the hell?" Sarah's startled exclamation pierced the air from the cabin's rear entrance. Her voice carried an uncharacteristic shrillness. I attributed my relative equanimity to the extended exposure to the skeletal remains, which had rendered their presence less jarring. While not horrified, I was nonetheless remorseful for inadvertently disturbing the deceased's repose and for appropriating the coins from their resting place. I collected the displaced currency, depositing it within my hat, which I held aloft like a ceremonial vessel, contemplating the partially exhumed skeleton. Recognizing the limitations of time and energy, I conceded the infeasibility of relocating the remains. Resignedly, I resolved to reinter the unearthed fragments, mark the grave, and relocate the garden to the cabin's opposite side. Sarah, meanwhile, had succumbed to a fit of sobbing on the back steps. "Sarah, honey, he's been dead for a very long time," I offered in consolation. "How long have you known that was there?" she inquired between sobs. "I found those coins," I confessed, "and I did harbor suspicions. I suppose I was reluctant to confront a reality." Penny and Olivia are going to play here, she lamented. I know, I sighed. We'll have to move him when your father and brother are here. The ATV will make the task easier. I swirled the coins within my hat, their brilliance captivating in the afternoon light. Sarah, seated upon the steps, recounted the tale of the mining claim's original owners, two brothers whose lineage had vanished into obscurity. I don't want to sleep here, she declared. I want to hike out right now. I acquiesced, acknowledging the futility of further gardening endeavors and conceding that the unsettling discovery had rendered the prospect of remaining unpalatable. However, upon entering the cabin, an unsettling disquietude permeated the atmosphere. As my eyes acclimated to the dimness, a subtle movement caught my attention. The window shades billowed in an unseen breeze, and the front door emitted a rhythmic clatter, as if recently ajar. Rover's frantic barking towards the door, coupled with his apprehensive retreat towards my legs, his ears twitching in agitation, amplified the sense of unease. A prickling sensation enveloped my back, mirroring the apprehension that gripped Sarah. The hatchet, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Indeed, the hatchet, our designated tool for kindling preparation, had vanished from its accustomed position beside the wood stove. I ventured deeper into the cabin, feigning composure for Sarah's benefit. Should an opportunistic pilferer be lurking nearby, with a penchant for weapon acquisition, a hasty departure was imperative. The stack of silver coins remained undisturbed upon the table, and my car keys, secured within my backpack, were likewise untouched. With newfound urgency, we collected our belongings and remaining provisions, abandoning the garden implements and utensils. Sarah replenished our water bottles, and I retrieved Rover's leash and bowl, but he was no longer at my side. Rover! I called out, Sarah's eyes widening in alarm. I flung open the cabin door to witness Rover sprinting towards the canyon trail, his barks echoing through the stillness. What is he doing? Sarah inquired, her voice laced with panic. I struggled to maintain my composure as tremors coursed through my body. Footprints marred the dust surrounding the cabin, even extending to the front window, their pointed shapes suggesting a deliberate act of surveillance. The axe, too, had absconded from its designated position near the rain barrel. Flashlights, rope, jerky, hatchet, axe, a systematic pattern of deprivation or a deliberate act of sabotage? My repeated calls for Rover went unanswered. Monday. Mark. My love transcends the boundaries of this earthly realm. Convey my affection to your brother as well. Someone will undoubtedly embark upon a search for us, but let it be the authorities, not you. I implore you, do not venture near Camp Wilson or the accursed mine. Sarah and I concurred that pursuing Rover was ill-advised. The afternoon was well advanced, and the prospect of reaching the car before nightfall was already tenuous. Driven by an inexplicable compulsion, I gathered the coins, their substantial weight filling the empty peanut butter jar. We shouldered our packs and departed the cabin, resolutely resisting the urge to glance back. However, upon reaching the trail and encountering Rover's paw prints etched into the dust, we instinctively followed their descent into the canyon's depths. Sarah led the way, her pace brisk. Perhaps she harbored hopes of retrieving Rover and completing the arduous trek before darkness enveloped us. With each step deeper into the canyon, I formulated contingency plans, envisioning a scenario wherein we would forcibly return Rover to the cabin, enduring a sleepless night fraught with anxiety, before resuming our desperate flight at dawn. The wind, however, conspired against us, snatching away Sarah's words as she forged ahead. "There are no paw prints," she announced upon reaching a clearing. Her observation proved accurate. Rover's distinctive tracks had vanished from the sandy, rocky terrain. As we turned to survey the path, the wind whipped through the narrow passage, obscuring the trail with a veil of dust. I strained my eyes against the blinding combination of sun and dust, desperately searching for our canine companion. "There he is," I exclaimed, spotting a fleeting glimpse of his reddish-brown fur and wagging tail as he darted around a bend in the trail. Our pursuit was now resolute, despite the absence of any discernible paw prints, save for the occasional angular impressions left by the enigmatic figure with the pointed shoes. "He's not barking," Sarah yelled, her voice barely audible above the wind's roar. "If he were chasing someone, he would be barking, wouldn't he?" The trail rounded another bend, and Rover was nowhere to be seen. The enigmatic footprints, however, continued unabated, their regularity suggesting a measured, deliberate pace. Sarah gestured towards a series of crevices and fissures in the sandstone cliffs, remnants of the geological processes that had shaped this ancient landscape. "There's a whole network of them," she commented, "like lava tubes." My thoughts, however, drifted back to the skeletal remains unearthed in my garden, to the cache of coins, and to the perils faced by those who had sought to extract wealth from this unforgiving terrain. No significant mineral deposits had ever been reported in this canyon, yet perhaps the deceased prospector had stumbled upon a hidden treasure, forever trapped within this desolate expanse. Treasures, it seemed, always came with a price. Finally, we reached the canyon's nadir, where Rover stood, tail wagging expectantly, as if awaiting permission to re-enter the familiar confines of our home. Fury surged within me, and I was poised to seize him by the collar when Sarah's restraining hand upon my shirt halted my advance. "That's the entrance to the mine," she declared, her voice somber. I followed her gaze to where Rover stood, poised at the mouth of a shadowy abyss that descended into the earth's depths. Within its maw, a figure beckoned, wielding our stolen flashlights and rope, luring our unsuspecting companion towards the subterranean depths. "No, Rover," I commanded, whistling for his return. "Come now. We're going home." My stomach churned as my whistle reverberated from the mine's depths, its tone distorted and elongated, imbued with a mocking quality. A chill coursed through my veins. Rover's ears perked up, and he darted into the mine's maw, disappearing from sight. Sarah and I called out his name, crouching near the mine's entrance. The darkness within was impenetrable, save for a faint reddish glow emanating from its depths. Sarah, her phone's flashlight illuminating the chasm's edge, attempted to peer into the abyss, but to no avail. The shaft was a chaotic jumble of loose rocks, its steep descent devoid of discernible features. A sudden cacophony erupted from within, the clatter of metallic implements, the grinding of shifting rocks, and a sharp yelp from Rover, as if he had been struck. Sarah, unable to restrain herself any longer, shed her pack and plunged into the mine shaft, heedless of my protests. "It opens up," she called back, her voice echoing through the darkness. There's all kinds of stuff, old axes, wood, burlap sacks. Her voice grew fainter. There's a pit. It's deep. A pause, then a disgusted sound. There are bones at the bottom. Someone died here. I don't see Rover. There are other shafts branching off. Come back. I yelled. We'll get help. Rover will be fine. Her voice, when it came again, was devoid of urgency. There's something here. It's beautiful. Sarah, come back. I screamed, finally succumbing to panic. Alone in the swirling dust, the heat of the day bearing down on me, the canyon walls closing in. Even with the endless blue sky above, I'd never felt so trapped. I'm calmer now. It's been 2 hours. 2 hours of silence from the mine. I've tried yelling, whistling, throwing stones, but there's no answer. Only an eerie stillness. I dragged our packs closer to the trail, hoping they'll be found. I left a note with our names and contact information, but hopefully someone will find these messages. It's all too much to explain. I'm going in, armed with only my phone's flashlight and one of Sarah's hiking poles. And the coins. My pockets are heavy with them. They're clinking, a constant reminder of the mystery they represent. I can't leave them behind. I don't know why. Forgive me, Mark, for squandering this last chance to return. I can't leave her down there. Tuesday. Mark. I stumbled through the mine shaft, retracing Sarah's steps. I saw what she had seen: paw prints, dust, old tools, a path through the rubble leading to a gaping pit. I peered down with my phone's light, illuminating the skeletal remains at the bottom, clad in tattered brown clothing. A chilling realization washed over me. This was the other brother, the victim of the man buried in my garden. And the coins in my pocket, I knew with a certainty that defied logic, belonged to him. He had slain his brother over their newfound wealth, then surrendered his share to the earth in a futile attempt to absolve his guilt. And perhaps, by unearthing those coins, I had unwittingly become entangled in this macabre transaction. Perhaps I had inadvertently restored the betrayed brother's claim, along with our flashlights, rope, and tools. Perhaps he had reclaimed his life, his spirit now free to roam the depths of his mind. Perhaps. We find bones and weave narratives, seeking meaning where none may exist. I emptied my pockets into the pit, scattering the coins amongst the skeletal remains. Take it back, I thought. Let your brother rest. Leave us in peace. As the last coin clinked against the rocks, a distant sound echoed through the mine, the metallic clang of a hammer striking stone. Fear gave way to hope, then to resignation. The sound beckoned me, a rhythmic pulse that reverberated through the cavern. I knew, with an unshakable conviction, that it would lead me to Sarah and Rover, to whatever malevolent entity held them captive in the subterranean depths. I pressed on, half blind in the oppressive darkness. Tunnels yawned before me, a labyrinthine maze of twists and turns. I saw no sign of the beauty Sarah had described, and soon even the remnants of mining activity vanished. My focus narrowed to the sound, the relentless clanging that grew ever louder. I realized, with a detached sense of curiosity, that I was ascending, my calves burning with the exertion of the climb. The cavern walls around me shimmered, reflecting the faint light emanating from my phone. Sandstone. I reached out, touching the smooth, warm surface. Then, rounding a sharp bend, my heart seized within my chest. Daylight beckoned, the warm glow of early evening filtering through the mind's opening. And the clanging ceased. I emerged into the light, a mixture of despair and fury consuming me. I screamed Sarah's name into the cave's depths, my voice swallowed by the silence. I was back at the canyon's rim, across the trail from the sagebrush meadow where our cabin stood. Close enough to see the cabin, the woodpile, the stump. The axe, returned to its place, glinted in the fading sunlight as if in mockery. I approached the cabin, cursing my decision to abandon our packs in the canyon. My phone's battery dwindled with each passing moment. Fear had been replaced by a grim determination. I had to know what else had been restored. Sarah? Rover? The sun dipped below the horizon, and the solar lanterns flickered to life. The hatchet was back beside the wood stove, the rope and jerky in their places. Our flashlights sat neatly on the table, as if they had never been taken. I grabbed the flashlights and retraced my steps down the canyon trail. Sarah's footprints and mine remained etched in the dust. The angular prints, however, were nowhere to be seen. Had they ever truly existed? Had the missing items been in the cabin all along? Had I imagined the coins unearthed in my garden? A desperate hope flickered within me. Perhaps Sarah and Rover awaited me in the canyon, ready to guide me home, their bewildered expressions questioning my sanity. I recalled my father's final days, his memory ravaged by illness, his ability to recognize faces extinguished. Except for Sarah. He never forgot his little girl. Our packs lay undisturbed where I had left them. I connected my phone to the power bank and, in a futile gesture, checked the tablet for a signal once more. Then, with a heavy heart, I turned towards the mine's gaping maw. I had to go back in. Sarah was still down there. Armed with the flashlights, I descended once more into the mine shaft. The emptiness was palpable. The walls of the entrance were now clearly visible, the rubble and the gaping pit illuminated in stark detail. This time, my light caught a glint I had previously missed, a vein of dark gold, shimmering like a wound in the rock face, originating above the pit and descending into its depths, an unbroken ribbon of unimaginable wealth. Its beauty was mesmerizing, and as I followed its path with my flashlight beam, I understood how such riches could corrupt, driving men to commit unspeakable acts. The beam of light reached the pit's bottom, and a wave of horror washed over me. The bones and tattered clothing were gone. In their place lay Sarah, her body broken, her head crushed against the unforgiving stone, a pool of blood staining the rocks beneath her. Rover lay beside her, his body partially concealed beneath hers, utterly still. The coins I had cast into the pit shimmered mockingly, reflecting the flashlight's beam. They lay scattered across Sarah's lifeless form, one nestled amongst her blood-matted hair like a macabre ornament. The metallic clanging had ceased. The night is cold and silent as I write these final words. The mind demanded its due, and it has been paid. That is the story I tell myself, though I cannot truly comprehend it. How, then, can I expect you to understand? Do not come for us, Mark. It is over. There's another one, Jake, Emily exclaimed, pointing towards a dark corner of the tent. Up there. It was our 11th mosquito that day. No pity. No mercy. Splat. Another one down. That the last of them? I asked, panting. Yep. The very last mosquito on Earth, babe. You're welcome, Emily said with a triumphant grin. Well, just in case, I said, grabbing the insect repellent lamp. Let's set this up outside and get some sleep. I'm beat. I unzipped the tent flap, placed the lamp outside, and switched it on. Its dim yellow glow pushed back the darkness, revealing 2 more mosquitoes that buzzed away at the sight of the light. I zipped the tent back up. Reminds me of Passover, I chuckled. Yeah, except I might actually choose death of the firstborn over this, Emily grumbled. Well, we haven't had a kid yet, I pointed out. Exactly. We get off scot-free. Knew I married you for a reason, I said, giving her a quick kiss before crawling into my sleeping bag. Tomorrow, we hit the cliffs. Tomorrow, the cliffs, Emily echoed, already drifting off. And with that, we fell asleep. Jake. Wake up, sleepyhead. I groaned. Ugh. It's morning. Ready to rock and roll? Can we? Adult contemporary instead? I mumbled. Emily laughed. Should have told me before we left. I would have updated the playlist. What time is it? 9 a.m. We're late. We've still got the whole day ahead of us. But I do want to get out there by 10, Emily said. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. I'd kill for some eggs and bacon right now. What about a granola bar? Emily offered, tossing one to me. Or a granola bar, I agreed, catching it. Haven't had my fill of those yet. We munched on our granola bars and then unzipped the tent, stepping out into the crisp morning air. Emily suddenly stopped. Whoa! She bent down, picked up the repellent lamp, and switched it off. How old did you say this thing was? Brand new. Got it last week, I replied, confused. Did you get it at a scratch and dent auction? She asked, pointing to a large chip in the glass that definitely hadn't been there before. It was covered in the unmistakable brown smears of mosquito blood. I took the lamp from her, turning it over in my hands. The hell? I swear it was perfect last night. Maybe it was just dark, and I didn't notice it, I said, trying to rationalize the damage. Jake. Emily's voice trailed off, and I followed her gaze to the ground. There were at least 100 dead mosquitoes scattered in the dirt. Maybe more. Gross. Let's get a move on before I puke, I said, tossing the lamp back into the tent. We shouldered our gear and hit the trail. The dirt path wound its way out of the campsite, past a few other hikers, and then curled around a wooded hill, leading us deeper into the forest and up the mountain slope. We spent most of the walk swatting away mosquitoes. "Did you bring any bug spray?" I asked, slapping my neck for the 100th time. The bites from these mosquitoes were incredibly painful. "I'm getting eaten alive out here." Emily sprayed herself down and then tossed me the bottle. I practically bathed in it, but I wasn't sure it was doing much good. The mosquitoes were relentless, and the higher we climbed, the worse it got. "Son of a bitch!" Emily yelled, swatting at her stomach. They flew down my shirt. I saw a couple of mosquitoes fly out from under her shirt. "Is this even worth it?" she asked, exasperated. "It should be," I said, trying to sound optimistic. "It's muggy down here, but it'll clear up when we get to the scramble. The wind should keep the mosquitoes away." "I think we'd need a hurricane at this point," Emily grumbled. "Right?" I laughed. "I feel like that guy from Gulliver's Travels, getting attacked by little people. What was his name again? Gulliver?" "That's the one," I said, spotting the boulders at the top of the mountain a few hundred yards ahead. I could even make out the neon green and orange jackets of other climbers. "Almost there. And look, there are people up there, too. Can't be all that bad." The sight of company and open space gave us a renewed burst of energy. We walked briskly to the treeline and out onto the gravel that marked the beginning of the rock scramble. The view was breathtaking. The mountain sloped majestically into the countryside, revealing roads, rivers, towns, and patches of woods and farmland stretching out into a valleyed horizon. For a moment, we forgot all about the mosquitoes. But then one zipped past my ear, and I was snapped back to reality. "Come on, babe." "Still too close to the woods," I said, urging Emily forward. The rock scramble was a welcome distraction from the mosquito onslaught. Each pile of arrow-marked rocks presented a new challenge, and we worked together to overcome them. But the mosquitoes hadn't let up in the slightest. I used my arms as much to wave them off as I did to climb. "How the hell are they up this far?" Emily exclaimed, swatting another mosquito on her cheek. "God damn it." "I don't know, babe," I said, wincing at the pain of another bite. Starting to piss me off, too. Maybe it's not windy enough? Maybe. Or maybe they aren't as bothered by wind as I thought, I replied, feeling a sense of unease creeping in. "I hope these things aren't carrying malaria," Emily said, half joking. Then she paused. "They don't carry malaria, do they, Jake? In the States?" "No. At least, fuck, I don't think so," I said, staring at a freshly swatted mosquito by my boot. It twitched once and then lay still. Emily groaned. "Isn't it really deadly?" "Yeah. Partly because it's more prevalent in the third world, where they don't have proper medical care and all that. But yeah, you don't want malaria," I confirmed. "Well, you're the one who's been here before. Think we should turn back?" "No. The path loops around at the summit, and it's not as heavily wooded on the other side. We've got a better chance of avoiding these things if we just keep going, I said, trying to convince both of us. We continued our ascent, climbing over boulders and getting closer to the peak. But the mosquitoes harassed us the entire way. I tried to stay positive, but it wasn't fun anymore. Not even a little bit. Emily suddenly stopped. "What's wrong? You okay?" I asked. "Those two spots haven't moved at all since we started up," she said, pointing towards the summit. I looked up. She was right. The green and orange spots had remained perfectly still for the past hour. A chill ran down my spine. Maybe they're taking a nap? I offered weakly. Maybe, Emily replied, but I could tell by her tone that she didn't believe it. Neither did I. We pressed on, climbing and scrambling, trying to stay focused. We swatted away mosquitoes as needed, but their incessant presence was becoming more than just annoying. I was getting worried. Asterisk, what the hell are these things? Asterisk, just as the thought crossed my mind, we heard a commotion a few feet ahead. We stopped and exchanged glances, then dove out of the way as a man and his daughter came barreling down the mountain, nearly knocking us over. "Hey, what the hell?" "Core," the man shouted over his shoulder as he ran past. "Core! Core!" We watched them disappear behind some boulders and then looked at each other. "Core? What was that all about?" Emily asked, bewildered. "I don't know. Let's just keep moving, okay?" "I'm getting real sick of this hike," I said, trying to mask my growing fear. We climbed over the next few boulders and passed under a stone tunnel, emerging at the bottom of the final rock slab that led to the mountain top. Even from there, we could see the figures of two people, one in a neon green windbreaker and the other in orange, lying on their backs a few hundred yards ahead. We moved forward cautiously. "Please be sleeping. Please be sleeping. Please be sleeping." But they weren't, of course. A faint buzzing reached our ears, and as we got closer, we realized the sound was coming from a swirling cloud of maggots feasting on what were clearly a pair of corpses. I retched. Emily screamed and covered her eyes. "Jake," she said, her voice trembling, "what did that guy say earlier? The one running down the hill?" I don't know. Hooray or Corey or something." "Corey? You mean Core?" I blinked. It did sound right. "Yeah, I think so." "Jake, Core is Spanish for run," Emily said, her eyes wide with fear. Another chill. I stood up and looked at the corpses again. Then it hit me. Those aren't maggots. "Emily, we have to go. Now." "What?" "We have to go. Come on." As if on cue, the cloud of mosquitoes lifted from the corpses and started swarming towards us. Emily shrieked again, and we turned and fled down the mountain the way we'd come. We leaped over boulders, slid down larger ones, risking twisted ankles and broken bones. We hit the flat ground and sprinted under the tunnel. Behind us, the buzzing of the approaching mosquitoes echoed off the rock ceiling. "Come on!" I yelled, pulling Emily through the tunnel. We scrambled back towards the rock slab at the start of the climb. I glanced over my shoulder and saw the swarm gaining on us rapidly. Faster. Faster, damn it. Must go faster. I pumped my arms and legs, and Emily did the same. We burst back into the tree and half ran, half leaped down the path. We flew over rocks and roots, dove under branches, tore through smaller swarms of mosquitoes lying in wait, and thrashed through the thicket. The sound of rushing water gave me an idea. Into the water. Come on! I shouted. But we skidded to a halt at the edge of the riverbed. Emily retched. I just stared in disbelief. The man and his daughter who had run past us earlier were lying face up in the water, dead. Their skin was stretched tight across their bones, their blood drained through countless puncture wounds. I dry heaved again, but this time it was Emily who pulled me to my feet. Jake. I spun around to see the horde of mosquitoes from the cliffs bearing down on us. Then I saw another group, likely the ones who had killed the father and daughter, flying back upstream towards us. We were trapped. Emily grabbed my wrist, and we splashed through the creek, gaining the far bank. We continued running, soaked and gasping for air, but all that mattered was getting back to the tent, grabbing the car keys, and escaping this nightmare. Come on, Jake, you out of shape, aging bastard. Just another half mile. Finally, we saw the campsite. It was eerily empty and quiet. Several tents had been ripped open and ransacked. Where were all the people? I didn't want to find out. I held open the tent flap. Come on. Help me out. What the hell are you doing? Those things are right behind us. Emily exclaimed. You want to run all the way home? I left the keys in here. Help me find. Jake. I didn't need to turn around to know we were out of time. The buzzing was deafening. We dove into the tent, zipping it up just in time to keep most of the swarm out. A few dozen managed to slip in with us. I found the keys, and we whipped and thrashed around the tent, swatting mosquitoes and stomping on any that hit the ground. We used anything we could find, books, pans, empty granola bar boxes, to kill the ones on the tent walls. Outside, the thwip 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 of mosquitoes hitting the canvas was relentless. Damn it! I yelled, swatting a particularly large mosquito that had stabbed me with what felt like a knife. What the hell kind of mosquito hurts this bad? Emily didn't answer. She just stomped on 3 mosquitoes at once and spat on them. Then she turned to me. What now? I shook my head. Those things are everywhere. I don't know how the hell we're getting out of here. What about the lamp? I looked at the battered lamp. It was in terrible condition, but it was our only hope. I knelt down and switched it on. Worth a shot. I'm not dying in here, I said, grabbing the wood-green windbreaker Emily tossed to me. It's 90 degrees out there. We'll sweat to death in these. Not for warmth, Emily interrupted, zipping her jacket up to her chin and pulling up the hood. For cover. The less skin we expose, the better. She showed me her forearm, red and swollen with bites. I shuddered and felt my own neck, imagining the welts that must be covering it. These mosquitoes aren't normal, are they? Emily asked, stating the obvious. She shook her head, then rolled up her sleeves and pulled her hood tight. Ready? Nope. Good. Let's go. I covered up as much as she did and picked up the lamp. Emily grabbed the tent zipper, and with a nod from me, she pulled it down. The mosquitoes swarmed in but immediately recoiled from the lamp. We took off running down the 3-mile path towards the parking lot, keeping our heads down. As we ran through the campsite, I nearly tripped over discarded gear and supplies. I saw a bloodless hand sticking out of a nearby tent. I swallowed vomit and kept moving. The roar of the pursuing mosquitoes was getting louder. Plink. I looked down. The mosquitoes were ramming themselves into the lamp, trying to break the glass and extinguish the light. I waved it around as we ran, but they were relentless. If we didn't make it back to the SUV soon, they would destroy the lamp, and then... We ran and ran, gasping for air. Emily was struggling, her pace slowing. The venom was taking its toll. Her head began to dip and sway, and her knees buckled. I grabbed her arm and pulled her back up, using my body to keep her upright as we staggered towards safety. Come on, babe. Just a bit more. All my energy was focused on reaching the SUV. Half a mile. I could feel the keys jingling in my pocket. A quarter mile. I could almost smell the interior of the car. A fifth of a mile. I started formulating a plan to get us both in the car and lock the doors before the mosquitoes reached us. A tenth of a mile. Come on, you son of a bitch. Move. My legs were numb, but suddenly, there it was, the parking lot. I could see the sunlight glinting off the roof of our SUV. I sprinted the last stretch, carrying an almost immobile Emily. I unlocked the car, threw her into the passenger seat, and then dove into the driver's seat myself, slamming the door just as the mosquitoes hit the windows with a sickening splat. They continued their assault, the sound like a hailstorm. I took a moment to catch my breath and kill the few mosquitoes that had gotten inside. Then I looked at Emily. She was struggling to breathe, her eyes white with fear. Emily! I shouted, leaning over to check her pulse. It was rapid and hard. She was alive. But if the foam at the corners of her mouth was any indication, she might not be for long. I threw the key in the ignition and slammed my foot on the gas pedal. See, Simon, come on and move, damn it. The tires screeched, and we were off, leaving a cloud of mosquitoes behind us. They tried to keep up, but as we rounded the corner, they began to fall behind. Fuck. I slammed on the brakes. The SUV skidded to a halt. Emily and I lurched forward, narrowly avoiding hitting the dashboard. I made sure Emily was still conscious, then stared at the scene in front of us. It was a massacre. Cars and motorcycles were scattered across the road, doors flung open, luggage and gear strewn everywhere. And bodies. Dozens of them, men, women, children, all drained of blood, their bodies contorted in grotesque positions. I slowly released the brake and inched forward, driving between the wreckage. Some of the bodies still twitched. Others looked almost mummified. But all of them had one thing in common, a massive wound in their mid-torso, piercing the spine. No normal mosquito could have done that. Something else was out here. Something far worse. I scanned the horizon and gradually increased speed. 5 miles per hour. 10. 15. The horrific images blurred past. 20 miles per hour. 20F. Splurch. I turned my head and saw a half-dead body convulsing as a spear-sized stinger plunged into its abdomen. Then a cloud of mosquitoes descended, and my gaze drifted upwards. I gasped. Hovering over the wreckage of a minivan was a monstrous mosquito, the size of a car, its stinger dripping with blood. I retched, stifling a scream. I floored the gas pedal, desperate to escape. FFUCK. The monstrous mosquito was fast, incredibly fast. It landed on the back of the SUV, its massive legs digging into the metal. The car lurched backward with a screech. Then, as if things couldn't get any worse, another swarm of mosquitoes emerged from the fog, blanketing the front of the SUV. I frantically switched on the windshield wipers, but they were useless against the sheer number of insects. The windshield began to bend, then buckle, and finally crack. Emily squeezed my hand, her grip weak. I tried to squeeze back, but the venom was coursing through me now, too. My movements were sluggish, my thoughts fuzzy. We were both going to be paralyzed, helpless against the swarm. I closed my eyes, thinking of home, of Emily, of everything I was about to lose. Crack. The back window shattered. I turned to see the monstrous mosquito ripping off the trunk of the SUV. It lunged forward with a razor-sharp leg. I swatted at it, but it was no use. The leg wrapped around my wrist, yanking me out of my seat. Emily watched in horror, unable to move. I was being dragged towards the gaping maw of the monstrous mosquito, kicking and screaming. My hand brushed against something cold and smooth. The lamp. I grabbed it with my free hand and swung it with all my might, smashing it against the mosquito's head. Smash! The already damaged glass exploded. Shards flew everywhere, but I had struck true. The mosquito shrieked, releasing me. I fell to the ground, hitting my ribs on the edge of the SUV. The monstrous insect writhed in pain, glass shards embedded in its head. I scrambled back into the driver's seat and slammed my foot on the gas pedal. Don't fail me now, baby. Come on, move. The SUV lurched forward. I sped away, taking advantage of the chaos caused by the death of the monstrous mosquito. The swarm gave chase, but the fog was lifting. I could see the main road. 40 miles per hour. 50. 65. We were free. I glanced at Emily. She was pale, her breathing shallow. White foam crusted her lips, but her eyes were open. She was still with me. We were pulled over by a state trooper who, after seeing the state of the SUV and our injuries, escorted us to the nearest hospital. Emily and I were treated with antivenin and for various cuts, bruises, and fractures. We were alive. We had survived. Over the next few weeks, I heard stories of other survivors who had barely escaped the condemned mountain trail. Authorities investigated, but I never learned what became of the place. I didn't care. I had Emily. We had each other. And that was enough. But one thing was certain, I was done with hiking. Maybe I'd take up stamp collecting instead. The campfire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the faces of my friends gathered around. A chill wind whipped through the trees, sending shivers down our spines. I hadn't thought about this story in years, but tonight the memory returned with a vengeance. It was my cousin, Mark, who told me this. We were never close, but a shared love of the outdoors brought us together that one Thanksgiving. He'd always been a man of action, a former Marine with a steely gaze and a quiet confidence. But that night, his voice trembled as he recounted his experience in the remote wilderness of the Montana Rockies. It was late fall, Mark began, his eyes distant, elk season. I was deep in the backcountry, miles from any trail, hoping for a trophy bull. He described setting up camp, the crisp mountain air, the anticipation of the hunt. Early one morning, he spotted a herd of elk grazing in a meadow. Among them was a magnificent bull, its antlers a testament to its strength and dominance. Mark raised his rifle, the familiar weight settling into his shoulder. He took aim, his breath catching in his throat. The shot echoed through the valley, and the bull fell. As Mark approached the fallen elk, an unsettling silence descended upon the forest. The usual chatter of birds and squirrels vanished, replaced by an oppressive stillness. He felt a prickle of unease, but pressed on, eager to claim his prize. Then he saw it. Standing over the elk was a figure, tall and gaunt, its skin a sickly pale green. Its head was crowned with a twisted rack of antlers, like a grotesque parody of the elk's own. Its eyes, black and empty, bored into him. Mark froze, his blood turning to ice. He'd spent his life in the wilderness, but he'd never encountered anything like this. Fear, raw and primal, gripped him. He stumbled back, his rifle clattering to the ground. The creature let out a guttural growl, a sound that seemed to shake the very earth. Mark turned and fled, crashing through the undergrowth, the creature's growls echoing behind him. He didn't stop running until he reached his camp, his heart pounding in his chest. He packed up his gear in a frenzy, abandoning his kill and his rifle. He didn't look back as he scrambled down the mountain, the image of the creature seared into his memory. Mark never hunted again. The experience had shaken him to his core, leaving him with a profound respect for the wild and its mysteries. He finished his story, his voice barely a whisper. There are things out there, things we don't understand. Things we should leave well enough alone. A shiver ran down my spine as I looked into the fire. Mark's story had left an indelible mark, a reminder that the wilderness holds secrets beyond our comprehension. As the flames died down and the night grew darker, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the shadows, its black eyes gleaming in the darkness. It was a howling night, the kind where the moon shines so bright it feels like dawn in the middle of the night. I was out in the woods, trying to learn the music of the forest. I believed there was a song in everything, the trees, the wind, the birds. If I could just find it, I knew I'd finally belong. But then, the music stopped. An eerie silence fell over the woods. I crossed the road and saw a mess of broken crates and tire tracks. It looked like someone had crashed. Even the cicadas, those tireless singers of the night, were quiet. I clapped my hands, and slowly, the sounds of the forest returned. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I hurried to my Uncle Bill's cabin. He was a strange old man, always playing his harmonica and brewing moonshine. I told him about the silence in the woods, and he said he'd heard gunshots and a dogman howling. He told me to stay the night, but I wasn't afraid. Not yet. On my way home, the silence returned. The swamps had forgotten the song. Dread filled me. Something was in the swamps, something that could steal the music. And then I saw it. The Dogman. It was a monstrous creature, tall and powerful, with glowing red eyes and a snarling mouth. It was like a giant wolf standing on its hind legs. The Dogman let out a howl, a sound so deep and unnatural that it sent me scrambling back into the swamp. I crawled out of the water, trembling, and there it was again, dripping and panting, ready to attack. I raised my flute and tried to play, to bring back the song, but the Dogman's breath choked me, stealing my energy. It licked my cheek, a horrifying, monstrous kiss, and I shuddered, fighting back the urge to scream. I kept playing, calming the beast, until finally, it wandered away. The next day, the news was full of stories about the Dogman's rampage. It had destroyed cars, caused millions of dollars in damage. People were scared. Uncle Bill said the government had created the Dogman in a lab. I didn't believe him. But I knew one thing, the Dogman was real, and it was a reminder that there are still dark and mysterious things in this world, things that can silence the music and steal the song. Halloween. I used to love it, but now it just fills me with dread. All those fake monsters, those cheap scares, they're a mockery of what I've seen. Because I've looked real fear in the eyes. I've met monsters. It happened a few months ago. My twin brother, Chris, and our friends, Tommy, Adam, and Zane, decided to explore a cave system near our town. We were all kind of nerdy, always up for an adventure. We packed our backpacks with flashlights, rope, and other gear, thinking we were prepared for anything. We were wrong. We set out before sunrise and reached the caves just as the sun was rising. It was a Saturday morning, and we were excited to explore the depths of the earth. We turned on our flashlights and ventured into the darkness. The cave was quiet, except for the dripping water, the squeaking bats, and the distant roar of the ocean. We marveled at the strange rock formations, the shadows dancing in our flashlight beams. We saw a few bats, some cockroaches, even a lizard or two. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then we found a narrow opening in the wall. Zane crawled through, and a moment later, he yelled, "Watch out, Guys, there's something here. We laughed, thinking he'd just found some animal droppings. I went through the opening first, followed by Adam, then Chris, and finally Tommy. We scanned the new chamber with our flashlights. That's when we saw her. A woman, dressed in rags, her face painted with strange symbols. She looked like a creature out of a nightmare. "He's awakened," she cried. "You've awakened him. Run!" We were startled, confused. I tried to speak, but she just screamed, "Run," and lunged at us. We scrambled back through the opening, and that's when I saw it. A dog's corpse, half decomposed, a knife sticking out of its neck. "Don't step on the dog," I whispered. The woman kept ranting, even after we all retreated. We didn't say a word, just hurried back the way we'd come. The woman's voice echoed behind us, saying things like, "Good boys," and "Listen to the hive." I was starting to get really creeped out. We'd been walking for 15 minutes, and there was still no sign of the entrance. Then I snapped. I turned around and yelled, "Get the fuck away from me, bitch." There was no one there. But then we saw movement above us, on the ceiling. Tommy's head, it just popped off. His body fell to the ground, blood pooling around it. I felt numb, my vision sharpened, time seemed to slow down. I turned around, and there it was. A 7-foot-tall scarecrow, its body made of cloth, one side orange, the other green. It had a sack for a head, with two lifeless gray eyes staring out at us. It turned its head 180 degrees, an impossible movement, and then it backflipped, its eyes still locked on us. I ran. I didn't think, I just ran. I heard my friend screaming behind me, and then Chris's scream, closer now. He was running towards me, a huge gash across his chest, and the scarecrow was right behind him, scuttling on all fours, its body inverted. We made it to the entrance, the sunlight blinding us. But before we could escape, a pulsating mass of flesh shot out from the darkness, grabbing Chris and pulling him back in. I tried to hold on, but we were both dragged back into the cave. I hit my head, and everything went blurry. The last thing I saw was Chris kicking at something that looked like a centaur with two horse heads. I woke up on the shore, the tide washing over me. My head was pounding, and I felt sick. Chris was sitting nearby, curled up in a fetal position, mumbling the word "skinless" over and over again. I tried to shake him out of it, but he wouldn't respond. I hugged him and cried, blaming myself for what had happened. Then I heard the woman's voice again, whispering from the cave, "We couldn't save them. The hive is sorry." I got Chris home, but he was never the same. He's still catatonic, unresponsive, his eyes vacant. Sometimes he mumbles in his sleep, and it terrifies me. I tried to tell people what happened, but no one believed me. They said we'd just gotten lost, that I was suffering from delusions. That's why I'm sharing this story here. Maybe someone, somewhere, will believe me. Monsters are real, and they live in caves.